Keep it for our third generation to learn all this stuff.
They were clean, but they still had their props.
What's for? That's stupid.
And so they didn't want to pay for it.
Beef?
They didn't want to pay for that because they had to buy them. Because they weren't going to eat that part of it.
You have to take the top part of the chicken out to get the crop.
Yeah.
You can't go in the back end, you have to go in the front.
So they didn't want to.
Okay, I didn't get that
Maybe
story
they
at
were
all.
just, maybe you supposed to do that way, I don't know.
I didn't get the story.
They had a, okay, they wanted to buy a goose and they had a,
No, these
you know,
are
the,
chickens.
or chickens, you know, the red thing on them?
Well, the comb you're talking about.
Oh,
The
oh,
crop is different.
No, the
so
crop. It was the
crop
crop.
is
It was
crop
all full of
is
corn and
gravel.
stuff, and it was heavy.
Oh, the gizzard, or,
And
not the
the
gizzard.
grocery store guy didn't want to buy that chicken that had this crop full of corn. He didn't want to pay for it.
Pay for the corn.
So they were butchered wrong?
I don't know what it was. I just remember that.
Why was Mary Alice called Little Skipper?
She was never. I don't remember. Ever.
yeah.
She
She
was
used to be
called.
called
Skipper.
Nimmers. Nimmer, yeah.
She was called Nimmers, and she was called Angel Feathers.
I never heard that.
Angel Feathers, because her hair was curly, looked like an angel.
I was dumpling.
A little,
What?
I was
Yeah,
a little
I was
skipper for a
dumpling.
while.
Well, because she was taking care of Eileen Pat,
And
so
I
Skipper
don't-
took care of some older kids. She kept
I'm
her
sure it was a
company.
negative thing. You're a little skipper. You know, not a
I
positive.
don't remember her ever being called
I-
Little Skipper.
I remember
You
that.
were Nimmer? Weren't you Nimmer?
Yeah, Nimmer. Yeah.
And Angel
What
Feathers.
does Nimmer mean?
I was called Beak and
That's right.
Claws.
Called Beaky.
Nobody called me Beak and Claws.
So you always call Beaky. Why you always call you Beaky?
And Beak and Claws. Good bull.
I don't know.
But why?
I don't know.
Nose.
Her nose.
Beak and Claws. Beak and Claws.
I think that's
We're
what
not
Beaky.
Well, who wants to start about what are you starting with taping? Is it working with that wind? Is that gonna get all the?
I have no idea.
Well,
The stories were flowing freely until now we start talking about boarding again now.
We got
We're pretty tall for everything already.
Okay, today
okay.
Oh, let me see what you got there.
These
are stories about Bernie, right?
Okay, I want to talk about, yeah, I was trying to think about it, and I'm going to get tearful, I can feel that already.
Okay.
What I remember is Mommy's always saying that Bernie was very smart, that she knew when he was very little, because the kids would go out and pick apples, and Bernie would pick up two at a time. Most of the kids would do pick up one, pick up two. But that she knew Bernie was really smart because he would pick up two apples and put them in, which was just a very, good problem solving. I remember what Bernie liked to eat, and I think probably people remember that. He liked Boston cream pie. So do you remember that?
I remember, yeah.
And we'd have, in the summer when everybody would come home and we'd have, doing the oats or whatever, and we'd have the meal, and then Bernie would always want a Boston cream pie, which he'd make out of a mix, and then he
Yeah,
liked
it was
that.
made out of a mix.
But-
Well, also, just eating, I love cream peas and he loves scalloped corn. That's right.
Yeah.
And every meal we had to have a big meal, a Sunday meal, we'd have scalloped corn and cream peas. And the other thing for breakfast, Virginia's not here, Skipper liked oatmeal, Virginia had cream of wheat, and Bernie liked Ralston.
Okay.
And so I kind of got to pick up. But every morning they'd have their choices. But
Some kind of hot
but
cereal.
he liked the Ralston. I'm not sure if you know what that kind of cereal. It's a hot cereal. I'm not even
It's
sure
like
it made
whole
like
wheat.
oatmeal.
It's like wheat. It's
Yeah,
not
wheat
cream
type
of wheat,
of meal.
but you can still
And a little
buy it.
sweeter. So
You
each
can
of them
still
had their
buy
own
that.
kind
You
of
can still
cereal
buy
they
it.
liked.
Well, and Bernie, I always thought was the one who was able to kind of negotiate between Mommy and Daddy, that most of the rest of us chose.
Yeah.
You chose one or the other, and Bernie
Oh,
was always
that's
very
true.
good at being able to not choose sides. So he was just supportive of what Mommy did, and he didn't challenge Daddy at all. And Daddy and he never would get angry at Daddy because he'd come home like from college, and Daddy would plan when the baby pigs were born, so that it would be when Bernie was home
And he'd take you
from
a picture
college,
with
so
you.
that he'd have to go out and sit with the pigs while the babies were born. And he never complained. I was always so impressed with that because I'd always get irritated. Like, you come home and then you got to do all this stuff.
Mama, I want to
Bernie
turn
never,
it off.
never complained about
Okay.
that he did, or something, you know, whatever it
I want
was.
to turn
that
it off.
He would have it planned
Dad's
for
coming,
him to
you
do
guys
this and that.
I want to
And,
turn it off.
So
Well, the
those
other
are-
story I was mentioning to Heidi yesterday is that
Mama, can we turn it off?
our mother was Catholic, very remote Irish Catholic, and she wanted us to go to church, but we didn't have. She couldn't drive, and we couldn't get to church. So the only time we ever got to church was in the summertime. We had catechism, and they had the nuns come from Green Bay to Tigerton for 2 weeks to teach catechism in the morning, and the priest would drive out
Yep.
and pick us up, those of us that would go. And Bernie did not go because Bernie was not Catholic. He was not going to be Catholic.
He was
so-
on Daddy's side.
He was on Daddy's side. He was on Daddy's side. And so I think all of us,
Yeah, we-
Skipper was not around, he was on a farm already, but the rest of us all, and I'm not sure Virginia was involved, but the other 5 of us,
Yeah.
we'd all go to catechism for 2 weeks. That was the only time we ever got. And Bernie was the one who did not go, but our father would kind of check, who went to catechism
Who went
that
and
day.
didn't
And
go, yeah.
so, but our father liked Bernie because Bernie was the one that did not go to catechism and wanted to be a farmer. And Lester was
that's
counting
right.
on, he
He
gave up
said
on
he would
Skipper
be a
being a farmer.
farmer.
Yeah.
So Bernie was going to be the farmer, and he went to Future Farmers of America. He got all the awards. He went to the fair. Always got a blue ribbon and showing his cows or his animals and so forth. And I think around his senior year, he got so fed up with
Yeah.
the way our father was managing the farm. He decided he wasn't going to be a farmer, and then decided to be he's going to. I think he wasn't sure about what it was going to be. Some areas science, because he was very good in all the sciences, math, and so forth. I remember when he did go to. So he said, "I'm going to go to the University of Wisconsin." It was the first person in our family going to college, and Hulda gave him a slide rule before the days of computer. They got a slide rule because you needed it for your freshman mathematics. Yeah, you're an engineering, right. So you got a slide rule, and I'm not sure you know what a slide rule is, a way to figure out before computers, you got to guess. And so I remember Hulda giving him,
Oh, I didn't know
Grandma
that.
giving him the slide rule. But
Okay.
he was going to be an engineer.
Yep, that's what he started in.
And before he went to school, he had no money. He had a scholarship. I think tuition was like $10 a semester. So our mother, we figured, okay, you're going to be there for about 4 weeks before you come back. So we packed boxes and the food, so he didn't have to buy anything at the university. We had lots of macaroni and cheese and cans and so forth. So you take all the food to college, and then when he came home, or we went down there, I think we went down there after the first month or 6 weeks of school, we brought all the food. So he didn't have to buy much food. Apparently we got to an ice cream place, but he
That was
did.
later.
He
That
spent
was
very,
later
very
when he
little
was
in
in.
college.
He had no money.
But he was also
No money. We had no money at
Well,
all.
one reason he was broke is he borrowed money, and we needed that new half silo.
Yeah,
And
right.
so
He
Ellie-
borrowed, yeah.
Ellie
Daddy took his money,
took his
didn't he?
borrowed money.
From me too. He took it from all of us.
No, he
Yeah.
took
The
everything
money
out
that
of
was
the
in
bank.
No,
the
but he
bank.
also took what Bernie borrowed to go to school as a freshman.
He
Oh, I
took
didn't
it.
know
And
that.
so that's how that half silo got built.
Yeah, we had a
And
silo
Bernie-
on our father. I had my 8th grade graduation
their
money. I had
money.
$20 or whatever.
Yeah.
And he got money from all the kids. We only had 20
Whatever
bucks.
we
But he
had
said
in
he
the
was going
bank,
to pay
he
30
took.
back.
He
Yeah,
emptied
it's
all
back.
our savings
But,
accounts.
but Bernie told me one time he got so desperate for food
Yeah, yeah.
that he was talking to somebody in the room where they prepared food, and a guy dropped half his Hershey bar on the floor, and so he took it and he threw it in a wastebasket. And when the guy turned around, he took it back out, and the guy saw him and he said, "Bernie, are you really that hungry?" And he said, "Yeah, I don't have anything."
Money, yeah,
So
he
the
had
guy
no money.
gave him $10. He didn't have
Oh,
enough to eat.
yeah, those days it'd be 100 now, yeah.
And so he was really, and he said he used to, the pork chops he would send down
Yeah.
were so old, they'd be covered with mold, and he'd have to scrape the mold off to cook
Oh,
them.
to eat them.
Oh, yeah, we give him, he had no
Yeah.
money at all.
He
We
was
gave him our
really
food.
poor the first year
Yeah.
down there. He was desperate.
And I think we drove him there, dropped him off.
Well, then at Christmas, we didn't drive him there. We took him out to the corner,
Yeah.
and so it would be like, 15 degrees, and he'd hitchhiked 150 miles down
Madison.
Madison.
That's the only way we
Christmas.
traveled those days.
The only
We
way
hitchhiked.
to get back
You
to school was to
hitchhiked,
hitchhike.
We all
Those days,
hitchhiked. That was the way we traveled those days. I hitchhiked all over the United
Yeah,
States,
yeah.
all over Europe. That's the way we traveled. Any distance, unless, like one time Mary Alice wanted to go to Chicago or something, we hired Raymond Schmidt.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
Raymond Schmidt, we had a neighbor that the lady who took care of us when we were born, her son, would drive. Well, when Skipper was in the Navy, he was at the
Great
place
Lakes.
at Great Lakes in
Yeah.
Illinois. So she would hire Raymond Schmidt
Right.
to drive. That was the only way. Otherwise, we couldn't expect our mother to go out there and hitchhike, and our father would not drive down to
No.
see us. So you had to find someone, and he did it for a few dollars and gas.
But Bernie got one reward for skipping catechism. He got to see the wrestling at
Yeah.
homecoming.
Oh,
Because that was the reward for not
Oh,
going to
so
catechism.
I didn't know
You
that.
got to see the wrestling. Now, if
Yeah.
you went to catechism, you're automatically.
We didn't get certain
couldn't
things
see 'em.
because we
But
were
if
on
you
the wrong
didn't
side.
go, if you didn't go, that was a reward.
But can you imagine how hard that was
Okay,
for
you're
Bernie to
welcome.
go to college and be there all by
Yeah.
himself?
Yeah.
I think that made it possible for the rest of us to.
I
if he
felt
could
that
do
I
it, then
was
the
one
rest
of
us
the
could do
later
it.
kids. It wasn't that hard for
No,
me
yeah.
because everybody else had gone. You know, Virginia was there. I mean, not there, but Bernie.
Well, and that he had been very successful, so
Yeah,
he could do it.
and you know, and she always said, "Well,
Well, he was going to switch, he was going to drop out of school in the middle
From
of the year.
engineering?
In the middle of the year, he was going
Yeah.
to come home.
Yeah.
And so LA got on the phone and said, well, come home and farm. He goes, "What you want?"
All right, that's it.
And so Mom wouldn't let him on the phone. She got him on the phone and said, you're not coming home. You're not coming home. And so he was thinking about switching. He just did
Didn't
not
like
like
engineering.
engineering. He did not do the mechanical drawing.
Well,
It was
yeah.
one thing he just hated. And so Mom said, you're not coming home. You're going to stay there. And she wouldn't let LA talk to him at all. So he agreed to stay. And then he stayed, I think, the rest of the semester. And then the second
Then he switched
semester,
to
he was
pharmacy.
fine.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
switched to biology.
Oh,
actually.
biology and chemistry. Well, that was the story I remember too with in high school that my mother thought, in a way she liked it that Bernie was very good in school and he get all A's. And Elmer Rue was teaching chemistry,
Chemistry, right.
and he gave Bernie a B, and he never gotten a B before because he said, you could do better than you're doing. You're doing better than everybody else, but this is not your top.
He was the principal of the school. Well, the other
So
thing
he
I
gave him a B, and
Right.
that was.
Now Bernie was the first one to kind of get a driver's license, stayed at home. Skipper got one, we never,
Well,
but
he-
Bernie got his license, and I went
wait
to
a
the
minute.
seminary when I was 13, a freshman
yeah.
in high school. And Bernie got his license
Well,
the
he
same
was
year.
driving, he was 15 before he had his license, and he was driving.
Yeah, so he was in, because that's the only way I ever got home. I would never have gotten home. I've been there for
Yeah.
forever. Now the other story with Bernie with the driving, he went to I think basketball practice at the high school, and he left the key in the car.
Oh, I remember.
And
I remember that.
We could not find the car, and it showed up about 3 days later in Milwaukee. And 200 miles away. And I don't know how we found the car,
Well,
got
the police
back.
found it. I remember the police came to the house that night when they couldn't find the car. It was gone.
Yeah, so they tracked it and whatever. But in those days, we left the key in the car.
These days we never.
Well, the other thing,
But now you'd lock it and everything's set now, but you left the keys in the car, you never worried about it.
But the other thing Bernie used to do is when we were like late high school, no matter how shy he was so shy. And when he was like 16, he'd give me the money and I'd have to go buy the donuts and shop because he was too shy to go into a store to
oh,
buy.
I didn't."
Yeah, he was that shy. He would tell me what he wanted and I'd go get him. 'Cause he couldn't do that. But when we were
Unless he
about...
was trying to help you get, giving you a chance to
Giving
do
you some
that.
chance to
No,
correct you.
but then when we were 15, he took us. Remember, we all went to the Braves games.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he would organize.
Yeah,
he would
Eileen
organize
has that.
a Braves game for us, and so Mike and I and Eileen went, maybe Mary Alice.
It was all.
And so
and our
we'd
mother.
drive down in the morning.
that
We'd get
was
tickets to the
terrible.
Braves game.
We went to the state
Then we
fair.
went to
Yeah,
the
state fair.
state fair after we had the tickets.
Right.
Okay.
Then we went to the state fair. To the
We
Braves
went to
game.
the state
And then at
fair.
about 11 at night, we'd drive back. And I remember the last time we ran out of gas right on the top of the
At
hill.
all
It was
the
I
40
was
out.
45.
And then one time, we did another time where he was sleeping and Mary Alice shouted, stop, or whatever.
'Cause he'd fallen asleep,
he had
'cause
fallen
he's-
asleep.
Yeah.
And Mary Alice said, shouted at him. It's 12, 1 in the morning. We had gone the whole day from 3 in the morning to 1 in the morning, and he was the only one who could drive the car.
We
So
might
had
have
to drive
all not been
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, we'd not be here. So he had to
Hey,
do all the
you're
driving, all the
welcome.
way there, all the way back.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't stop for food or anything because we
No, we
couldn't
never
afford
buy
it.
food, and we carried the gasoline in a 5-gallon tank. We never stopped to buy gas. We'd have a
didn't have
5-gallon
any-
tank and we'd
yeah.
fill
We
it
didn't
up.
have money, probably.
And about halfway back from Milwaukee, that's why we didn't make it.
You forgot?
Well, all the
We
gas
didn't have
stations
quite
were
enough.
closed too by at 2
By
in
that
the morning.
time,
At
it
that
was so
time,
early. I mean, so.
I'm sorry.
Well, that was I was remembering that we went the whole day.
It was
we were all
an
exhausted.
exhausting
Yeah,
day.
And then
sunny,
Bernie had to drive
very
all
hot
the way
day.
home. The
Then
rest
we
of us
used
could
that
sleep in the
breeze.
back
Yeah, we all were
Sleep.
sleeping except for Ray House, I guess.
And
Yeah.
you guys are lucky. I didn't have a chance to do anything like that when I was.
Well, we did 2 or 3 years.
Once a year we get at least a Braves game going. They were on TV. Those days you didn't have any games on TV.
We went to a
Was that
double
all?
header too. That was.
Yeah, sometimes we go double header.
We
just
saw
to get
Robin Roberts. We saw. We saw.
Warren
No, I
Spahn,
can't
Warren
remember.
Spahn.
I had Robin Roberts
We saw
baseball
Hank Aaron
card.
hit a home run.
I had
did we?
Robin
And
Roberts
Eddie Matthews.
baseball
Eddie
card. but I
Matthews,
don't
they
know
went
what
here.
Traded
happened to
to
it.
Philadelphia.
I think it was up in the attic.
I remember all that. Jeez.
And one time
go
Bernie
on,
was
who's
driving.
Who's the winning pitcher?
Mommy was in the car,
Robin Roberts.
and I was in the car, and Bernie was driving between our house and towards Wentz. And I think he was looking at the radio or
And he
something.
went in the ditch,
He
yeah.
went in the ditch.
But that was before he had a driver's license.
Well, I don't remember what it was. But
Yeah.
he went in the ditch, and then he got out of the car. And maybe they got a tractor to pull us out.
Well, we did it once. He came to Sacred Heart Seminary where I was school, and he lost the road. He went down into the ditch, one of those ditches, and we
came back out
came
again.
back out.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why we did ditch. You know, he was driving, and then maybe we were all
Well,
chatting.
it was flat enough. We didn't get stuck. You
Yeah.
could go down the ditch.
He went down the ditch and went right back up. Yeah. I'm surprised the car didn't turn over because it was on the.
We're pretty lucky we're all here for
Yeah,
these stories.
we would have had a number
We
of
never
things
fallen
on.
I
asleep
don't want
or-
to go in that dance in those days. I don't know.
Well, no, because it clunked the car.
I think the first memory I had of Bernie, but there were probably other ones, but the one that was really stood out was when Herb came home. The hired man came home real drunk,
Uh-huh.
and he was coming into the living room. "Oh," and Bernie just set the law down. You get in your room and you stay there.
Oh,
my gosh. And don't come out. We don't want to hear anything from you at all.
Oh God!
I was setting the law down. Whoa, that's a good idea.
He was in high school then at that time.
Oh.
No,
No, he must have been in
He was in
college
college.
because
Dan
Danny
didn't show up
was
till later.
around.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was around for Pat when he's a sophomore.
Because
in Mary
Virginia
Ellen.
was
Yeah, tell about Pat. Tell your
Huh?
story about Pat.
No, not
It's about Bernie.
Yeah, no, I want to hear about that.
Danny always tells a story.
We want to hear
that's,
it.
that's okay.
Go ahead.
We want to hear all
No,
stories.
you
they,
don't. want-
they want to hear about Bernie's brother too.
Yeah, let's hear it.
No.
You have to see him later.
Playing
Now
to wear
I
bib
wanna-
overalls. I think that must be.
No.
Now I want to
I think it.
No, well, we'll hear
I
something
don't.
later.
You're so
Oh, you
curious.
got another one, Eileen, to start
Well,
us off?
I just remember how much I admired him because when I was in freshman in high school, I had to write this essay about who are the 3 most people you admire in the world. This is my mother asked me, well, who'd you put down? So I said I had Abraham Lincoln, my mother, and Bernie.
How interesting.
I didn't want to bring it to
Oh,
my
hi.
birthday today.
Yeah.
Oh, I got it at the gift shop at the hospital. I hope you like it.
Well, thank you.
You're
We're
welcome.
gonna see you tomorrow, though, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see. Let's
I
all
just
my
thought
family here.
I was in town today anyway. I want to have some of that steak fried.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that is so good.
Well, thank you.
Well, congratulations. See you later.
Well, I remember that Pat and I would fight all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yeah,
would
I
throw
remember
stones.
Mike throwing a
One of the reasons I went to the
rock at
seminary
Pat.
to get away from Pat. Because he was bigger than I was, even though I was 2 years older. He was bigger and he was more accurate with stones. But we would we would be going around the farm throwing stones, and I was getting really whacked and so forth. And
I remember in the kitchen in the old
Yeah,
house. I
Bernie
remember
was-
Mike
Bernie was someone
throwing a
negotiator
stone
saying,
at-
"You two
and it went
guys."
right through the window.
but yeah, it was really rough and tough.
Oh
but,
boy, they really.
but I never remember fighting with Bernie. But one time, I remember one time we were playing musical chairs in a living room, and I was just among the family and playing the music, and the music stopped. We run for a chair, and I'm running for the same chair as Bernie, and we're fighting for it, and Bernie gets in it, and I get really angry, and I grab a vase, and I threw the vase at Bernie, hit him in the head or whatever.
Let me Is it
So that's I remember that's the only thing I remember about that musical chair. Maybe some other time.
The rest of the story that I think that's what happened because that's one time I remember Bernie getting really angry. He got mad at you and you were running around. He got one of my mother's statue of like the Blessed Virgin.
It was a Virgin Mary.
And he hit you over the head with it, and it broke. And you know how they had the little metal stabilizer. He was so mad. He hit you over the head with the.
Maybe that was the same fight. I don't know, but I remember throwing something at him, and maybe he gave me after
he
me.
also took a swing at Mike one time because he had a cut on his hand right here. And I remember bleeding because they were fighting over the sink at the old house over something, over food or whatever. And he sort of swung like that and he hit a glass jar.
Good at ducking, you know.
And he had a
I
cut on
just
his
had
hand.
to laugh. It was the statue of the Virgin
I don't
Mary.
remember that part. I just remember throwing at him.
You don't remember because you blacked out
I
probably.
blacked out the other part, you know.
Well, what I remember
You
is
were running around.
I
the
know I was running
table.
away from it. I do remember
Yeah.
after I threw the thing at the run because I knew it was going to get me.
And after he got it,
well, what I would do is, if Bernie told me something to do, I wouldn't do it. And so we would be raking hay, and he would be pulling the tractor, and I'd want to be on a tractor, but I was on his steel wheel thing.
You were working.
And so, but I could trip it, okay? And so it's my turn. And so he wouldn't let me drive it, so I just tripped it and leave the hay in the middle. He had to go back and get it. It lasted all afternoon. He never let me drive.
you were probably too young. Yeah, I'd forgotten when you got
You're never too young to drive a tractor.
Well, you are if you're
Yeah,
a
that's just fun. At 9, 10-year-old, you can drive a tractor and a farm.
Yeah.
You can drive around circles instead of fun.
What do you have for that, Virginia?
Well, I have one. We lived in the house in Marion.
God, no
That
memories.
Bernie and I each had a bottle of milk, and we had Carol syrup. They put Carol syrup in the bottle, and Bernie and I were in like a back bedroom, and we were each drinking our bottle of milk that had Carol syrup in it.
Well, see, that was something that Daddy wanted us. That was.
Yeah, we all
Oh,
drank
Mommy
milk
didn't
Carol syrup.
want
That
that.
was the
Daddy
way we made
put
milk.
I
Carol
was
remember
syrup.
powder
Bernie and I
milk.
just
Yeah.
laying there
Cow
drinking
We
milk.
that.
have like these bottles you put a nipple on, and
Yeah.
you must have
Yeah.
been 3 or 4
Well,
years
7
old.
when you
yeah,
drinking
we
you
were
know,
drinking
Carol syrup.
bottles.
Sweet, you know, it's like-
Marion
Do you
in
know
the
that the
back porch.
first day I went to first grade, I had nipples in my pocket? Don't tell anyone, but
Well, I remember Bernie and I did that.
Oh yeah, and Grandma Meyer hated.
Still have
that 'cause-
some in there?
Yeah.
Now, Virginia, can you remember this one? Because I just told Heidi and Carol, because I was 3 years old at the time when Bernie got the candles near the
Yes.
curtains
Yes.
and burned the house down. I was too young to
No,
remember.
he
You
would
were
burn the
probably-
house down.
just
He
burned
burned
part
the
of it.
inside of the house.
Well, no, it was in Marion,
Right?
and he lit a candle, and then he was coming down the hallway, and Mommy was coming, so he wanted to get away from Mommy and not let her see that he had a
He was
candle.
supposed
So
to-
he went behind the door, and they were closed there, that he caught on fire.
And then they put the fire out.
Yeah, then they put the fire out.
But wasn't the house burnt? I
No,
thought, well, I remember. Was the house ever burnt?
everything's more dramatic.
There's a burned house because I remember, the steps, and there was at one point or another, someone burned our house in Marion.
I just remember the clothes were
I thought
burning.
the house got burned.
Yeah, there's some. We gotta find the story about because
I just
we got
remember-
the reason we left Marion is because the house was burned. I thought.
We left Marion because we were going to live on the farm.
And then we went to Split Rock.
No, we started at Split Rock.
That's right, Split
Then
Rock
we
to
went
Marion, and then we went to the farm, yeah.
But it was time that we could go on this farm and pay $15 a month
$15 a
rent
month for that farm.
to
Yeah.
Grandpa
Grandpa
Marquardt,
Marquardt, yeah.
and that was our house.
Yeah, for $15 a month, we rented that farm.
Yeah.
And then how many acres? Like 10 acres?
Yeah, at least
40
10 years.
like
so, yeah.
40 acres, and he had about 17,
Well, maybe raised up
young
or something.
stock heifers.
He had
Yeah,
like
he
2 or
took
3
care of all
cows
the
that
young-
he milked by hand.
Yeah, all
And we
the
had 3 cows we
heifers.
milked by hand.
Yeah, the rest
Lady,
were heifers.
There were 3 cows.
Well, I don't think he had Lady at that time.
Oh, I thought we had.
Lady he had when we lived in Split Rock.
We had
he
3
had-
cows, so you had one,
Queenie.
Skipper had one,
Queenie
and
was
Bernie had one.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's when I had a heifer. I had a calf to take to the fair.
I thought
Now
you
that
did.
was
Bernie-
quite a bit later.
Bernie had a little calf, and I had a calf, and they were twin calves. And then I got a
better
blue
prize.
ribbon. I got a blue ribbon on mine, and Daddy was very angry with me because when I washed my calf, it was all white, and I used bluing,
Oh.
and I used too much bluing. So the white was trying to blue.
That's for the judge.
But I did get a blue ribbon. I think Bertie got it. I don't know if he got a blue one or a red one. But they were twin calves at John County Fair.
So bluing, what do you mean when you say bluing? You mean
It's
Some color, coloring.
It's like
It's
like a
something to make
bleach,
the
kind of
white-
like a bleach.
Makes the
but-
white look a little whiter.
oh, I see.
But I know,
Oh,
yeah, you're trying to add color.
too much bluing for Virginia.
Like the dogs, you get them all polished
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Well, when Bernie was in medical school, then you were at there were several of us at UW. You
Yeah,
were
we were all
there,
there.
and
There were
Ralph
four
and
of
I
us.
were there, so there were four of us. And on Sundays, I lived in a dorm, and you lived in a house with
The
a.
Baptist students.
On Sunday, my dorm didn't have any food. You know, they didn't have a meal for us, so
Neither did
we
I.
would go to the apartment that Bernie had with Jim Power, which is how Mary Alice and Jim met, and Ted Hopel or something.
Ted Halper.
Halper.
Ted
How's
Halper.
And
he
one
doing?
other person.
What was the other?
Charlie Weisner was
Yeah.
also
Char- oh,
at
yeah,
the
okay.
school, and
Yeah.
Tom Schaefer was
Tom
his father.
Sheep.
Yeah.
And he was a
Okay.
pharmacist. Yeah.
And so that they would, wouldn't you buy food for
I
us?
would buy the food, and you girls would come over, and that would be our best meal of the
Right,
week.
we make a good meal. We got a free meal. It was a good deal.
Did you and Bernie were the ones who turned Schaefer into the psych ward, weren't you?
No, Ted Halpert and I went
Oh,
to
okay.
visit the doctor at the student medical center because we were concerned that he was a senior in pharmacy, and for final exams he was taking all kinds of pills to keep himself awake all night. And the guy was a little loony to start with, and he also loved guns.
I remember.
Guns, and so we were talking with the psychiatrist there. We were worried this lethal combination there, and he asked us to be religious. I said, no, it's not religious. So that was a good sign, because it wasn't God was not going to tell him to go around and start shooting people. And also then Tom himself told us there was no way that he would have ever, shot somebody with one of his guns, because that gun would then be melted down. That would be a terrible fate for this beautiful rifle that he had to get.
But didn't Bernie and you and Ted take your landlady out to eat one time so she got all dressed up in her coat, and then you took her to McDonald's?
Oh, I'm sure we probably took her
That's a
to
joke.
the restaurant we ate at was about 3-4 blocks from her house, and most of us would go there together every night for dinner. It cost $1.25 in 1964, and we'd get like meatloaf, and,
Every night they had a set menu.
mashed potatoes and green beans. All the meals included green beans, and Bernie hated green beans from his childhood on the farm. And so he would always,
Well, you
when he
picked him,
ordered,
we didn't
wanted-
like him anymore.
He would substitute a bowl of applesauce for
Oh,
the green
all right.
beans.
Well, that was something we did as kids. Mostly the older kids had to pick beans. That my dad would plant a couple of fields of green beans, and we'd have to pick them.
Pick all day.
And
Oh,
then,
yeah.
then you would
But you
take them.
and Mary Alice got
But
out
you-
of
I
it.
got out of
you
a lot
eat
of it.
them
Let
during
me
the day while you're picking. You eat a few,
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
Mike and I did more of the picking.
You did.
Bernie and I did a lot of picking, and Bernie and
But
I
we
were
would
the
go to
best
the-
pickers. Bernie and I could pick. We could pick 100 pounds of beans a day, and it wasn't for Daddy. It was
Oh, you went up to.
Seafeld.
Emperor
Breitfeld.
or
Yeah,
Brightonville or somebody would
Yeah.
come in his car, pick us up, and we'd pick all day for him. We'd get 4 cents a pound.
Yep.
But I thought it was,
Yeah.
you used 2 hands rather than 1.
Yeah.
That was Bernie. You could pick 2
Two
after.
hands.
Well, yeah, so did I.
We got
Yeah.
5 cents a pound a few years
I
later.
remember somebody
that
would
was
come
all
by
day
with
for
a
morning
tractor
Yeah, I
and
know,
pick
I
us
know.
up.
80
Like
pounds is
P&G.
a lot of beans to pick in a
And we
Yeah.
picked 100 pounds a day.
Yeah.
Bernie and I.
Did
That was
Bernie,
the best.
We were the
Wasn't
best.
That, that 100 pounds.
Virginia.
Real
What?
mark.
did Bernie turn in his money to your dad for the silo, or was it just you?
No,
Everybody.
it was in the. He went to the
We
bank
put our
and took the
money
money
in
out.
a
He didn't
bank
ask us.
account, and then
Well,
you
we're-
He
we're
was
in
near
there.
his kids, so he just
took
cashed
the
in
money that
everybody's.
was in there.
When it
Whether
was
it was
in the bank.
$5 or 50.
The father had right to go to church.
We were underage, so.
Oh, I thought it was just Virginia. The way it was told, just Virginia.
No, he took
No, he
everybody's.
took everybody's
Took
money.
Yours
everybody's.
too?
Yeah, that's why I don't use banks anymore.
Some
took
of us had-
everybody's money.
didn't have very much. I only had $20.
Well, we didn't
Yeah,
have
I
I
it.
think I had 45.
Well, I thought that was to
Bernie
build
had
the
several
sign
hundred.
bowl.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
He took the money to build a sign.
Yeah, it's
Virginia
built
had
the same.
300 or so, didn't you? That's what you
All
told
those
me.
beans. Yeah. Picking all those beans.
And then, you know, I didn't spend the money. I didn't buy any school clothes. I'd go to school the first day of school, and I didn't have any new clothes.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I didn't
none
spend
of us
my money
did,
on any
Virginia.
clothes or
No one
shoes.
did.
Yeah.
None
we-
of us
I
did.
put it in the bank.
Yeah.
We
I
all
remember though, at the before school began each year, they had this one person that would come with a truck and he'd have all these clothes,
Oh yeah, the door-to-door.
door-to-door
Yeah.
clothes. So
Oh,
we
I
would
didn't know
generally
that.
get some clothes for a
Well,
school
that
year.
was before I was.
And
I was gone
so
then.
they would, our mother would look and she had a little bit of a budget, and each of us got, one or two
Got
things.
T-shirts, so what I remember.
I was already away from home then. 'cause
Yeah,
I never
maybe,
had
so
new
we got,
clothes for school.
and same thing. We usually got shoes every year or 2
We all,
years.
we all
He
got.
always
One
got
pair a year.
straw
Yeah, in the
shoes.
summer
He
we'd not wear
always
shoes.
loved
Our
shoes.
feet would
We
be
didn't
like
wear-
leather. We just walk all over
didn't
the
wear
sand
shoes in
and
the
gravel.
summer.
But compared to other kids, we always got a new pair of shoes
Right.
before school started. We all went to the dentist once a year,
Right.
and
Yeah.
because most kids didn't do that,
Yeah, we always went
and
to
everybody
the
who
dentist.
needed glasses got them.
Yeah,
There's a
and
lot of
remember
kids in the
Bernie had the
grade school
bad
didn't.
feet?
Yeah, Bernie
they
had
had
bad
to
feet.
take
It-
him
right,
to
that's
Green
all the
Bay.
back
That
roads
was
to
all
Green
that-
Bay.
Also,
That was the first time Lester
also
had
went to
When
Appleton.
we used to go to
Not bad
Jeanette's,
feet, but-
Jeanette
Right.
ran Red Cross in Shawano, so once a year
Yeah, we
she'd
did.
let us look through all
When I
red.
was real
yeah.
young, I got close
But
to
I remember
Jeanette.
Bernie once got a brown coat, and it had a name on it. It said Gene. It said Gene. It was a tag. But it fit him.
Well, I got him when I was quite young, but
But
after
you're
that. I
going,
didn't
going to
get
Bernie,
any
but Bernie
clothes.
had feet. The arches were not good.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the local
So
doctor
we're
said he had to
past
go to,
school.
and so
Yeah, I did.
and the only place
Yeah.
they could do it was Green Bay.
Yeah,
And that
and they
was,
drive all the
our
way to
father
Green Bay.
never gone that far before in his
But
life.
he went to Green
He
Bay.
checked the
got
back roads,
orthopedic shoes.
and so once, about 4 or 5 times
Yeah.
that year, he had to take Bernie to the
And he did that.
foot doctor.
He
Yeah,
also
did
took
that.
He got those
pencils.
shoes, and but he had to drive probably every couple of months. He had to drive Bernie.
But then
I
she
guess
had-
Bernie
he
made
took
10 or
you
12
too.
at a time.
Yeah, and the podiatrist had bad feet. He walked like a duck.
That's what.
His feet, his shoes squeaked every time.
But I remember Bernie when he'd come home, going to the foot doctor. He must have given him exercises because remember with his foot, it's like trying to pick up a marble.
No,
Yeah.
and then
What was that?
Then he was
Oh,
supposed
something
to
in
write
his
his
toes.
draw.
Yeah.
He was supposed to draw pictures with a pencil between
Yeah.
his toes.
That's it. Yeah.
That was
and
that.
trying
So
to pick
that's
up
what
a.
Bernie tried to.
I remember Bernie coming back
I don't
from
know.
Madison, hitchhiking rides.
Yeah.
And he hitchhiked from Madison. He might get a ride to Wapaka or somewhere. Then he would call up.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
right,
we
he'd
go the
save
last
up.
20, 30 miles, pick
Yeah.
him up.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
he would hitchhike.
Yeah.
Nobody hitchhikes anymore.
No, you'd be dead if you.
Yeah. Not safe. But then it was a way to.
Yeah, that's why
for
we
him to
tried.
get
So that's how I worked in Chicago and Milwaukee a couple of
Yep.
summers. I hitchhiked back and forth to the farm.
Yeah,
Yep.
Mike hitchhiked
Yep.
a lot.
And sometimes you made it all the way,
And
and a guy would drive you there, and you really found it, and right to the farm door. Others, you got stuck in Rochelle.
Couldn't go, yeah.
You get some place
Yeah,
where
we
there's just
remember-
no more rides left. There was
Mike has the record for most arrests.
Right.
family.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. I remember you calling up
Must
from
have,
Galloway
yeah.
one time and us coming
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
got in that car.
You
Took
got
off
arrested in
tomorrow.
Ohio one
Lester,
time.
For
pardon?
You
what?
got arrested in Ohio one
Oh,
time.
just
You
hitchhiking.
Yeah, I
Was
got
that
arrested a
illegal
couple times.
to
Yeah,
Yeah, one time Mike
No,
was
that
at
was
our
for
house and
selling.
you got stopped by the place because you're hitchhiking.
yeah. Thank you very far. Well, one time I was, yeah, in Madison. I was just leaving you.
Yeah, you're just
In
leaving
Madison,
your
I was
house.
on the way to Mary Alice's in Ohio, and then way back to New York for the seminary.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and I get picked up by the police, and they said, "Well, you can either pay $10 or you spend a day in jail." I said, "Well, it's no choice. A day in jail. I don't have $10." So I get fingerprinted,
Oh, you're
and
kidding.
I
didn't
spend
know that.
maybe it was 6 hours in jail. And they let me out, and they drove me to the edge of town. When they were gone, I had nowhere else.
No, I didn't have any money.
They didn't have any money, so I hitchhiked that way. And I remember one time the same thing happened. I was in Sweden hitchhiking, and there's these signs, with the thumb and a circle with a cross saying
That
you can't
means
do it.
don't do it.
Don't do it. So I'm there trying to hitchhike. I was hitchhiking all over Europe, and a police officer comes to me and says, points the sign, and trying to say, and I don't understand what I said. I don't understand. So he trying to, I can't do it. So he drives me about 20 miles to a place where you can hitchhike. He said, okay. So, because you couldn't hitchhike on super roads or something like that, but there's
yeah.
side roads.
Yeah.
So the police The Swedish police officer drove me to a place and said, "Okay, you got to hitchhike again." so I got out and started thumbing again.
And at one time, Bernie and I, Daddy told us to go and shut the barn door that was up by the Hemo in that old house.
Yeah, I remember.
And then we shut the door, and I happened to glance up behind us somehow or other, and that whole door was falling down, like going to land right on us. And so we just ran.
You made it.
Just out of the corner of my eye, I said, "Bernie, that's what." I said, "What came off his rug?" Or
Yeah, it was
whatever.
going to fall on his head. Yeah.
Well, I also remember he was named after
Uncle Bernie.
Two
Uncle Bernie.
uncles,
Yeah,
Bernard Lewis.
yeah.
So there were two
yeah.
uncles, Bernard
Uncle
and Lewis.
Uncle Bernie.
Wasn't there Mulvaney?
If you look back, the name
Mulvaney or
Bernard
something?
Meyer
Bernard
goes
Meyer.
all the way back to 1803, because
Right.
I think Ramona posted something on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I think it was 1803 there was a
That
Bernard
was-
Meyer at that point.
Yeah,
And
that
so
was a big
there was a
family.
Bernard Meyer until his uncle Bernie died. His
Well, we
name was
had-
Bernie Meyer.
Oh, right.
So that was 100 years.
Of course, who the Lewis was who?
It was another uncle.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know which
But
one.
Bernie-
But they were both uncles.
Well, I remember one thing about Bernie is when Mike and I left, we met, and then we lived, I came to Virginia in March of 1970. And then I remember, I was 20 or 21, and he was 26, and he had left the seminary because he met me. And,
You were that.
and yeah, Elaine was very nice about it though. But anyway, I thought, well, at the time I was kind of just a crazy young person, And Bernie and Carol came, and I remember it was after Mike he called at Easter, and everybody was up here or something, and he said we got engaged, and Bernie came and he was such a nice, of course at that time I thought, oh, he was like this, he was in this Navy uniform, and I was like this hippie person, And, but I remember now, of course now, I see it very differently, and I said, he was such a concerned, nice big brother.
Yeah.
Because he took Mike aside in the bedroom. We had a little rented apartment. It was like a one bedroom, and of course I couldn't tell you or Elaine that we actually lived together.
Oh.
We were pretending I was somewhere else, but anyway, he came and he sat in the bedroom with Mike, and he must have had like a 2 hour or one. It seemed like forever conversation. And he probably was telling him, Mike, you're making the biggest mistake of your life because you're out of the seminary. Look at you saying you're throwing your life away. You're marrying this girl, And I at the time I thought, oh well, whatever.
Actually,
but now it's really a thing.
Yeah,
And,
he was
he was
concerned.
really a concerned, and Carol too. I mean, he came there. And I would say the same thing to my kids, at the same situation. I'd say, what are you doing? You're crazy. You're 26. You just finished a seminary. What are you doing now? Getting into this situation. This is never going to last.
See, I think I
So
remember
that was
that trip
nice.
because Carol and Bernie, I think, stopped in Madison on the way to Washington, D.C. to see you, and on the way
Yeah,
back.
and we went to Williamsburg together afterwards.
Right.
I think you stopped one time in Madison. We were living in Eagle Heights.
Well, I remember going to visit you. I don't know, you must have been along. We went when you were in Sisseton, South Dakota.
Oh yeah, right.
And
Well, that's
visiting
when
you.
Bernie got married out in.
Well, his sister,
But he was living in
married.
Sisseton.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember going there and
Yeah, Eileen and I
And-
made a trip around the
yeah,
West. Yeah.
and that you had, I don't know, was that government housing there or whatever? And you had a cat, and then you had your dogs and things like that. But Bernie took us all, showed us where everything was, and took us out eating.
To the rodeo, we went to a rodeo.
We had no money.
Yeah, we went to a rodeo. I remember the rodeo there in Sisseton.
Yeah. And what I remember you saying at that time, Carol, was that again, Bernie did not lose his temper, but something had happened in the hospital where somebody came in and was drinking, and he got so angry at this Native American man.
If it's the same story, it was a patient in the hospital and he started kicking me.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
yeah, I
is
heard
what it
that.
was.
And I have never seen Bernie react like that. I mean, we were married at that. Well, it was either, I don't know, because I was there 3 months before we were
Yeah.
married. But he went after the patient.
Oh God.
And
I remember that.
I mean, his
I'm hearing
face
about it.
turned purple. I kid you not, because I was getting kicked. Right
He
here.
told me about that, remember?
And Bernie started to chase him, but the guy went out the window of the hospital. And at that point, Bernie just, I don't know. I mean, all I remember is Bernie let him go. Figure, if he wants to go, he can go. We're not going to worry about it. I mean, talk about AMA, huh?
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe it was, but it was just, he
know
was
that
being
was-
protective of me, of course. But it was just, I remember, I saw this explosion of anger that I had
You've never seen before.
never.
Well, we-
I never saw again.
Well, Barb and I went to Sisseton after we were married. Bernie had come to the wedding because he was finishing his residency, or I think. And so we took a camping trip to Sisseton, South Dakota with Ma.
Oh, okay.
In tow.
And Bernie, yeah.
And then we camped in outside Minneapolis, and we went to Sisseton. And so in a day, we drove from Sisseton to the Black Hills, and then we went camping up in the Black Hills, but it was like 40 degrees, wind. We had a Coleman stove, but there was no fuel, and nobody had any, so we couldn't start a fire. We froze. So the next day we got up, we drove through the National Forest. I don't remember
We
what
went
it
to the
is.
Badlands.
Custer. Yeah, we went to the Badlands. We went to Custer National Park. Went through the wind caves, and then about 10 at night we started back. And Bernie said, "Well, Pat, now you can drive."
You get off that driving with your kids.
So then I drove, from there to Sisseton. We didn't get in till like 4 a.m. So we just crashed. And the next morning he got up at 6 because he was on call 2 hours later after the whole trip. So we had taken us all through this, all these places.
I think that this had been the same trip of that one picture you gave me.
No, that was a time when I think I was with Mike and we did something.
Because you said it was before Bernie and I were married.
Right, I
Would
think-
it have been in that fall before we were?
No, this was even before he knew you. I think it was
okay.
when he was getting ready to go out to Oregon.
Oh, out to Oregon.
Yeah, we went together. I think.
Me and you and Bernie.
Bernie.
Yeah.
And he was going to. We dropped him off. Or no, we dropped you off. I think.
Yeah,
it was,
I took the
remember
bus.
the first night we left Wisconsin, Madison. We camped in some forest in Iowa.
Okay.
And then, but somewhere I think then you went back.
I had to go back to college.
You're right. You went to college. So Bernie and I went through Durango, Colorado. Remember that? We went
Didn't you go to San Francisco?
Yeah,
and
went to
somebody
San
stole
Francisco.
his
He's on his
guitar?
way up to Oregon.
Yeah.
Stole
I
everything.
remember the car
The
got
only thing
all
he
of the
saved
stuff.
was his camera was under the seat.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So we went to we made a trip. Went to Texas and Kansas and the Grand Canyon, and we got to San Francisco, and we went to a nightclub. I won't say where. The next company here, but we went to a nightclub, had a good time.
Well, that's no hint at all.
And at 2 in the morning, we went back to the car and had been robbed.
Yeah.
All of his clothes were gone.
I
So he didn't
remember-
have many clothes, but everything was gone. I didn't have much. I just brought my, but he had all of his clothes for the whole year he was going to spend at University of Oregon, and they were all gone. So
They say he saved his camera. It was
he
under
saved the
seat.
camera. A couple things were saved, and I remember he went. We went a little bit further north. He got a haircut someplace in Northern California. And he felt really good. He said, "I feel good now." I'm not sure if he knew you then or then.
No,
would
they
he know?
wouldn't have known.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then he went to Oregon and so I was traveling with him. Then I think I went up to went to Seattle and I rented got a car that I drove back to
I remember
Madison. But
came back.
we spent a week together, and I remember even going through Durango, and I said, I was wearing sunglasses. And we're going through Durango, and he said, well, I said, where are my glasses? He said, don't want to wear your sunglasses. I said, no, my non-sunglasses. We're driving. But we never, so we did all through the night. I never saw Durango in daytime. We still haven't. But we rarely, we never stayed at a hotel. We either slept on the side of the road or...
And you ate candy bars?
You ate candy, whatever. And so one of us would drive part of the night, and the next night we'd rest during the night, and during the day we would...
That's
But I don't remember staying at a hotel anywhere on the trip up to get to Oregon.
Barb's could never get used to just eating candy bars and potato chips
Yeah.
on the road.
When we drove to their wedding, I remember that. Just being.
Yeah, but just kept going. Yeah, I was with you. Yeah, we were in your Opal, right?
Yeah.
The
Weren't
Opal,
there
yeah,
five
that's
of
a
us
story and a
around?
half too.
No, we weren't going to go to the wedding because it was in the middle of the winter and I was teaching.
I know it was
camp.
winter.
Yeah.
And so but then Mike and Eileen couldn't go, I think, unless somebody drove. They didn't have any money. And so I agreed we would go.
Yeah.
And so we started, the day we left, there had just been a huge blizzard.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Mike had just had knee surgery. Had to be in the front. There was this tiny little car and the heater didn't work.
Yeah, heater didn't work. That was it.
So we go up 94 about 30 miles an hour, just covered with ice. And we get to Minneapolis, we get west of Minneapolis, and then we hit a blizzard, just a huge blizzard.
Yeah.
And there are drifts, like 4 feet high. So we finally get to like Bemidji, and I asked if the station whether I could put chains on a car, and the guy said, "Well, which direction are you going?" And I said, "I'm going west." He said, "Well, don't go east. That's been impassable for hours." We'd be driving down the road, and suddenly a 2-lane road would be one road, and there would be 5-foot drifts. So we made it that far. So then we get to Sisseton, and we stayed there one night, and then we picked up Bernie.
Oh, right.
And so then we start heading to Mobridge, South Dakota, and his car breaks down in Mobridge. And so we're sitting there in Mobridge, and so he didn't have enough money to fix it, so I loaned him $20, but I only had 90 for the trip. And
Eileen and I were out very much.
So then we were freezing. Then that night we made it to Billings.
Right, we
were going to Billings or beyond.
And Barbara was with us too, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then we went to midnight mass in Billings.
We were Billing midnight mass.
And then
that was Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, Christmas Eve. Yeah.
We got up early the next morning, and it was, we hit a Chinook in Montana and made good time. And then we were going through Lookout Pass at midnight the next night, heading for Spokane. And we had this guy following us very closely, and suddenly there was a car in a ditch, so I stopped. The guy behind me ran in the ditch. And so we got out to ask, what's going on, and so they helped the guy in front of us out. And he said, "Well, what happened to that guy?" And I said, "Well, he's been on my tail all the way up the mountain." He said, "Well, leave him in the ditch." So then we got to Spokane at midnight? Yeah. And we slept there one night.
We did have a hotel there.
We were so tired we couldn't see straight. So then we got up the next morning, went down Columbia Gorge, and we got to your house about 10 at night on like the 4th day.
Yeah,
we couldn't even see
Christmas.
straight. We couldn't even see straight.
I remember Carol was all excited to see Bernie. I remember
And I remember my mother had Christmas dinner waiting for you.
Yeah, there was dinner. Yeah, she had dinner.
Yeah. Oh,
And we were calling.
I think a place to sleep. I think we had some good sleep.
And then I went up the next day, I think, to pick up Ma for the wedding.
Right.
And she gets off the plane and she sees me and says, "Thomas Patrick Marquardt." Why'd she say that? I don't know. She was waiting for us to figure out I was the first person she saw. Otherwise, she would have said Michael John Marquardt.
So anyway, after the wedding, then we continued. We went to San Francisco.
But weren't there like 6 of us at that point?
No,
I
just
remember
5.
being in
We're
pain
up to
with
5.
some
We had Ted Alpert, as Bernie said, "Ted can't get home. He has no money, he can't get." So I said, "We got 4 people in Silver Opal. It's just packed to the
So you
back."
took Ted
He said,
Halpert?
Yes.
He said, "You can fit a 5 in. I know you."
Bernie said that, or Ted said
No,
that?
that's what Bernie said.
So how far did Ted go with us then?
He drove from Salem, Oregon,
Right.
to San Francisco.
With him, yeah.
He introduced us to the Indian family that
Right.
fed
Yeah,
us that hot,
yeah.
hot potato dish.
Yeah,
But then here we have a couple great stories about Barbara.
Yeah.
Because we get to San Francisco, we go sightseeing, and we have this great restaurant that sells
Fisherman's
great
Wharf.
fish. All these restaurants in San Francisco are fish.
And somebody had given us money.
$20. The
$20
guy
for it.
We crashed
And
at
we go
somebody's
out
house
and
who didn't know us.
Barbara
And we
orders
just sort of
chicken.
Showed up. And the guy took us in.
And it's terrible chicken, and it's, because I don't know what happened on the menu.
forever.
And she got chicken.
And it was burned.
And it wasn't very good. It was burned. And so we said,
But you were trying to buy something that was not expensive. I
Right.
think that was
Maybe
part of it.
So then we leave
But
San
you did,
Francisco
but
and
you
we
did.
start heading back to Wisconsin, and we go through Salt Lake City,
Oh yeah.
and Carson City, and we say we should stop because there's a beautiful Capitol building.
That's right.
And Barbara says, "You've seen one Capitol, you've seen them all. We don't have time to stop."
You made me go to
Sacramento, whatever it was. She said,
and
"We've seen one, you've seen them all." So we didn't stop to see the Capitol.
But we were headed for Reno. We were going to be there one night. So we
right.
get to Reno, and we pick up some barmaid whose car was broken down. And so when we went to the casino, she gave us tickets
Yeah, right,
so as to have a drink.
Oh, yeah.
And then we had a drink
And we
at
got some food,
midnight.
too, yeah.
And then we drove from Reno overnight to Salt Lake City. We got
Right,
to Salt
okay.
Lake City the next afternoon. We were so tired we couldn't see straight. They were too tired to do anything. You
Right.
and I went to see the Mormons. They were
Right, yeah. And then when we got to Nebraska, I knew a Lutheran minister in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And so we had a place, so we stopped at this minister's house, and we got caught in a blizzard.
Well, no, we were stuck. We came across Wyoming.
Yeah, whatever.
At like 60 miles an hour because we had a good tailwind, but Nebraska was black. It was just black. Yeah, it's just,
So we stopped at this guy's house, and we were stuck there for 3 days. He had to, his parish, and
But
there was too much snow.
We actually followed a snowplow
Yeah.
for 200 miles.
Right,
had
till
no
we got to
place
his
to
house,
stay.
whatever. But we could not
had to get
leave
to the North
Nebraska
Platte.
for 3 or 4 days because we were in the snow. There was just snow. There was on the road
North
for clear.
Platte, North
And
Platte.
then we get to Iowa, and then the heater was gone.
Yeah. It was
And I remember seeing a
20
sign
below
in
zero.
Dubuque, whatever, 20 below, and inside the car was maybe 19 below. And we were freezing, because there was no heat, and it was just, and we're driving at night. There's no sun or whatever. But
got
I don't
home
think
at
we
midnight.
spent one hotel the whole trip, when we were in Billings or someplace. But
if you had any sense or maturity, you never would have taken that trip.
We
You
wanna go
never
to
would have
weddings.
gone if you thought about it.
Yeah.
Well, I
No
had
money.
and
no
now they
money at
complain
all.
when
No
we spend an
money at
extra
all.
half-hour GPS going to the beautiful, the heater's working, the
We had no money to go. I
rain.
mean,
We
why
would go hours and hours, no
We
food,
didn't
no
have enough
heat,
money.
no
We didn't
nothing.
have enough money to stop and eat. What were we doing? And you didn't have any money. I
Yeah, we had
remember
no
that.
money, yeah. We had enough. Well, we had the candy bars, I guess. That got us.
Well, I don't
made it-
remember
we-
feeling deprived about eating. It was the heater didn't work.
Yeah,
It was
that was.
Well,
we
what
were,
would
it
happen
was
is
cold.
I
As cold as
stayed in
ever
a
been.
cold car, but you and Eileen and Barb would switch with Bernie and ride with him for a
Oh,
while.
that was on the way out.
On the
Yeah.
way out there, we
Warm
get a
up.
little bit of get a little heat, yeah.
Were you gonna say something?
Well, I was just going to say my version. I mean, it sounds like you guys took the same thing we did. When Bernie and I were married on the 28th of December, it was a day that had been snowing all day, which
Yeah.
is unusual
Yeah,
for
right,
Salem,
yeah.
Oregon.
Yeah.
And people were calling all day to say they couldn't come to the wedding, and my face was getting longer. But these people had just come clear across the country in this horrible weather, and the pastor and the priest and the entire wedding party was coming from Portland. Well, that's not a good thing to do in the Willamette Valley in the winter. So anyway, fortunately the wedding happened, and Bernie and I had made reservations at the Village Green, which is 20 miles south of Eugene, for our wedding night and the next night. And I'll never forget, in those days we were married at 8 o'clock at night, and we had simple, coffee, punch, and wedding cake reception with nuts and mints. That's what you did in the church basement. And so it was 11 o'clock when we left the church, and we headed to Eugene. And I'll never forget, because it was snowing. And Bernie said, if I had any idea how far this was, because it was 70 miles to where we were spending the night.
70
miles? Yeah, and we started out at 11. So he was not particularly happy about that. Then the next morning we got up, and everything was covered with sort of a sheet of ice. But we had made arrangements to go back to my parents to open wedding gifts. And that was an hour, an hour trip. Well, we did that. We were in the old Pontiac. And which was sort of a wreck, but anyway, that's what we had. And so then we went back to it's Cottage Grove for the second night, and then we spent New Year's Eve in San Francisco, and that was actually magical because the ticker tape was coming out the windows, and the city is celebrating, and we walked the city of San Francisco up and down, up and down. And the next day we went then to Reno. And we got there late at night, and I remember just falling into bed and getting up the next morning and driving on. I mean, I couldn't even tell you what Reno looked like. And I've been there once since, in the daytime. We had a granddaughter going to school there. And then the next night was Salt Lake. And
same path.
Very
similar.
Yeah, and we did the Mormon Tabernacle, took the tour and all that. And the next night was Cheyenne, Wyoming. Well, going into Cheyenne, we had glare ice. And I remember Bernie, he was driving, but I remember him being so worried about having an accident and my face being cut. That was what he kept talking about. But the next morning, as we were waking up in Cheyenne, he was very ill. And he had what turned out to be the Hong Kong flu.
Oh,
and
gosh.
he spent the rest of the trip from Cheyenne to Sisseton in a heap in the back seat as I'm driving the car.
Oh, gosh.
And as we go, you know, as we're into South Dakota now, what I remember is it's the middle of the night. I'm driving. Bernie's sick. You can't tell the road from the fields because, of course, everything's flat
Right,
and
yeah.
everything's white,
Oh, gosh.
and it's nighttime. And I suddenly had this sensation that I needed to stop. I had no idea where I was or what was around me, but it was just dark, and I needed to stop. When I stopped and looked at where we were at a junction in the road that was kind of like a Y that went to what I'm assuming was an east-west road, because we were coming from the south. And between these junctions was this really deep, kind of a crevasse, not a crevasse, but a very deep ditch, that if I'd have kept going, and here I am by myself in the middle of nowhere with a sick husband, it's like, you know, that would not have been a good scene. We ultimately got home into Sisseton at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not a snow driver, that's the other thing. And I'm driving in this stuff. I mean, I survived. Parked the car in the garage, and the car never left the garage for 3 months. The old timers in South Dakota, the worst winter since 1896, you know, I mean, snow up to the telephone poles. Well, in 1896, now it didn't get to the telephone poles, but I mean, it was snow. For someone who was a Willamette Valley girl, snow on the, I mean, we couldn't open our
Siberia.
yeah, we couldn't open our front door. Our home was on the hospital grounds. We couldn't open our front door because the drifts were so high, and we had several steps up to the front door. So, you know, then we had a rope from our house to the back door of the hospital. So we could make our way through in the blizzard because we both worked in the hospital. And of course, Bernie had to go back and forth at night because he was on call every other night.
I remember when we picked him up, the snow was up to the roof.
I mean, it was unbelievable. And the snow didn't melt until after Easter. I mean, it was, and then we had lakes, you know, of melted, well, water. But anyway, it was quite an adventurous honeymoon.
What a nice honeymoon, huh?
Oh, goodness.
Meant for him to get that.
Oh, dear.
Well, we visited Bernie, and I'd been in England for 9 months, came back to Madison to finish my PhD presentation, and so it was the end of August, first part of September. We were going to drive out to Seattle, where we'd stored our stuff before we went to England, and we'd gotten one of these deliver cars. You know, people want their car delivered to Seattle. It was a military guy who wanted it delivered up to Anchorage, Alaska, but he had to go to Seattle, get on a boat, and go up there. So I had to go down to Illinois, pick up the car. It was a souped-up hot rod, you know, like a 400 horsepower motor, got 10 miles per gallon. Fortunately, gas was still pretty cheap. And I learned then that Mary Alice drives with her toes on the gas pedal because she would twist her toes a little bit and the car would go 20 miles an hour faster. Suddenly she's going 90 miles an hour. So we drove that to Sisseton, saw Bernie. Place, I think he'd just been there a couple of months. And then continued along across the rural roads of South Dakota. And I can remember it's not a good idea to drive on those roads early in the morning because you're going through wildlife reserves and there's some really big birds that like to sit right in the middle of the road.
Oh, I can't remember
And they
that.
did not fare well.
Nor did you, maybe, huh?
Well, fortunately, it was the car that yeah.
The one thing I remembered about Sisseton is that that same year in 1970, whenever Elaine would call, you know, she never asked, well, how are you doing, Mike? Do you have enough food? You know, hey, how are you doing since you know, how's your job hunting going or anything left in the 70s? She would say, well, what do you think about Nixon and Agnew? Or I think it was, you know, political questions. And to me, she had said, well, you know, I always wanted the son was a priest, but you're interesting, you're from Switzerland. Tell me, did Hannibal really cross the Alps with the elephants? That was her first letter to me before I even moved to the States.
Oh, yeah.
And then the first phone calls from Lester were always, it was going on and on how he was going to go to Sisseton for Decoration Day, which is Memorial Day. We called it Decoration Day.
Yep.
He never ended up going, of course, because, you know, but he was asking Mike which back road he should take, which road,
In order to
and
get
I
that
remember the conversation, he kept talking, and then you do this, and then you take M, and then you take this one, and that one, and he was gonna go visit Bernie. He almost got up his courage to go, I think, but then something happened, and he ended up not going, but he kept talking about going to Sisseton to visit Bernie for Decoration Day.
Right.
Yeah, I
right.
remember that.
Yeah.
too.
Now I wonder why Decoration Day was significant for. I mean, because nobody had died. I mean,
No, Decoration Day is called Memorial Day.
right.
Well,
That's
I
what-
don't know
weekend
why.
off.
There,
Oh,
did they have a rodeo or something there
There was
on
a
that
rodeo.
weekend?
Oh well, that could be.
A
That could be.
rodeo?
That could be.
Maybe
yeah.
there were cows or something.
Well, you know,
There
we're
were bulls.
4 blocks from the stockyard.
Oh, God.
And so
Oh,
we would
that's
sit
what
on
it
our little
was.
front
Maybe
porch
they-
at night, and I remember saying to Bernie, you know, we're going to look back on this as we're smelling the
Yeah,
fumes from the stock. I said, we're going to look back on this as some of the best years of our life.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, South Dakota had sunsets like
yeah,
you could not believe.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, we were newlyweds, and I mean, we were healthy, and you know, even though the stock market, yeah, it stuck too. Even though the stockyard was so smelly, it didn't really impact, you know, the joy we felt in just being alive. Yeah.
Danny, we went to Sisseton too. I remember going there. What I remember about it is you made some really good lasagna.
Food memories. Regina is always the food memory person.
Oh, isn't that
that's
But I don't, do you remember that, Danny?
No, I don't remember Sisseton at all.
I don't know how you could forget Sisseton. Oh my
The
goodness.
lasagna.
I don't think we went there. We went to Medford, Oregon, in our small camper trailer.
No, I think we went to Sisseton also.
Do you remember going there?
I'm not sure.
Was
I'm thinking if you would have come in, I mean, Sisseton was this very small town of about 2,000 people, half Native American. We were on the Sisseton-Wahpeton Sioux Reservation. You come in from the west, and you come in on a bit of a hill. It was the highest point in the area, about 1,000 feet. But it's desolate, it's dry, it's dusty, it's dirty. And I remember thinking, this is where I'm going to live for the next 2 years. And you know, a one-street town, and you come into town from the west, and then you go north up Main Street, and the hospital was at the top of the street. It looked more like a concrete bunker than a hospital. I mean, it was a concrete building with little tiny windows, kind of a very heavy door. It didn't look like a hospital. You walk in, you push a button on a little glass window cage to get the attention of someone. And a little Filipino nurse came to the window, and she said, now this is when I was going there a few months, when I first arrived, going to meet Bernie after I had been in Europe the previous summer, and he had already started. So I told her, when she opened the window, can I help you? And I said, well, would you tell Dr. Marquardt that Carol Carson is here? And so she excused herself, and she came back, and she said, well, come on in. She took me into the emergency room, and I sat on a stool in the emergency room for the next 6 hours.
Oh my God.
Without making more than eye contact with Bernie after having not seen him for 4 months, and watched him care for one emergency after another.
Oh.
Some Indian had been in the wrong bed and got stabbed. Another had his throat, I mean, he was almost strangled. You could still see the imprints of the hands on his throat. There was a horrible accident that came in. There were at least 3 people involved, 1 DOA, 2 badly injured, and another man who came in with a terrible wound and a filthy, dirty bandage on his leg. And when Bernie was unwrapping it, the maggots were teeming.
Oh my God.
This was my introduction to the life of emergencies and Indian healthcare and the Native people and the trauma that was a part of everyday life there. And also watching Bernie move from one situation. I mean, he never had a break. It was just one after another, and it went on until midnight before he hardly could catch his breath.
He worked. He
Then
was
12
really.
o'clock, something else took over.
No, I think things just slowed down so he could go
So
home.
then you'd be on call.
Huh?
So you could say hi
Exactly.
to you. Yeah.
Well, as I've always said, you know, it was to watch him all that time. And then, anyway, and so we walked towards the house, and when we went in the door, he took me in his arms, and I thought, I know I'm home. So that was
How nice.
that was wonderful confirmation, because when I had come back from Europe, I learned that he hadn't gotten some of my letters, and I have Grandma Marquardt to thank. I mean, I learned all this after the fact, for kind of encouraging Bernie to hang in there. I don't know what conversations they had, but I mean, he was ready to write me a dear whatever letter.
Your Carol letter.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so, but he hung in there. But yet, when I came home and I called him to let him know I was home, unfortunately, I woke him up out of his sleep. Not a good thing to do. And he didn't really sound particularly happy or interested in hearing from me. And I mean, I was about ready to pack up my car and embark on this trip to South Dakota, which had been our plan. And it sort of left me with this, you know, well, should I go or?
He probably was so
you know,
exhausted.
Huh?
He was so exhausted, probably sleeping, didn't
Well,
know
and
quite
he had
know
been,
what was happening.
You're not getting letters either.
And he hadn't gotten any letters.
And he had been up all night and was sleeping, you know, so anyway. But I finally decided, you know, I'm never going to know if I don't go.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
piled everything in and took off. And that was, I said, so that was coming into Sisseton that night to this desolate place, and then watching. And then, as I said, the confirmation that I received when we finally got to connect, you know, was like, okay, you know, I'm home. So it was a wonderful ending and beginning, if you will. But life in Sisseton was quite an adventure, and being able to experience the culture of the native people and become friends with some, and there were some amazing people in the community. I mean, there's a lot of dysfunction, there was a lot of addiction in the I remember Bernie always would say, until we can find a substitute for alcohol for the people, you know, life is not going to change. And so many of the young people tried to go to Minneapolis, and they, you know, to get out of the life there, and they couldn't make their way. And but the people loved Bernie. I mean, he established such a connection with the people, and when we, you know, we were invited to their powwows, and we really were part of the community. And when we left South Dakota, they gave Bernie a peace pipe. And,
I remember,
And I have since given that peace pipe to Chris. But it was just, you know, a symbol of their affection for him.
Yeah.
And I remember when Chris was born, Etta Finley, who was kind of the grandmother of the people there, the elder grandmother, made this beautiful little patchwork quilt out of pastel colors for Chris, which I still have. It's a precious quilt. And I think, you know, I mean, she had to be late 80s or 90 when she made this. And, you know, sent that to me when Chris, or sent that to us when Chris was born. So it was a wonderful time. And working, you know, the reason Bernie chose the Public Health Service over the Navy, he received both commissions on the same day. But he chose the Public Health Service because by that time he knew he wanted to be a pediatrician. And he felt it made much more sense to work in a community of children and families rather than being, you know, on a destroyer at sea, if you will, with a bunch of guys. It wasn't a typical experience for a pediatrician. And so, and he really got indoctrinated on, you know, I mean, they did everything in that little hospital, you know, from the emergencies, which were unbelievable, and delivering babies, and just all the medical needs of the people. And then they had a clinic for the native people, and he had he and the other, there were two doctors, and he and the other doctor rotated their days in clinic, and so that was kind of the well baby stuff, the ongoing care of individual medical problems. And the public health nurse was a wonderful woman. Her name was, anyway, Mrs. Herring. I'm working on her first name.
We all understand.
It starts with an E, but anyway. No, it's Esther Herring. And her husband was the superintendent of schools, and she had 5 children. But she was just this very mature, motherly, beautiful, white-haired lady that everybody on the reservation also loved. And I still am in connection with Esther. She's like 90 years old, living in Minnesota, and her husband's been long gone. But it just, I mean, the memories and the connections we made there were very, very special, and I think certainly gave Bernie a wonderful preparation, if you will, for the rest of his practice.
Yeah.
Vegas
Ah.
on the way, and we're walking, on the street, and there was a fight, and someone had his arm cut, and someone said, "There's a doctor around." Brace, okay. I remember he ran to the car, got his little doctor kit, and took care of this guy whose arm was bleeding. Everybody's gathered around. He was taking just out of the blue.
Yeah. First aid.
Yeah, first aid.
Samaritan. Wow. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I think about Bernie so much is his humility. When he was an intern, and that's when I first knew him, I was a nurse on the pediatric ward, and he was there doing his internship. It always struck me, and I think it was one of the things that attracted me to him, that it didn't matter whether it was the chairman of the department or the custodian. He treated everyone equally, and he accepted people for who they were, and he was non-judgmental. And he had a very compassionate heart. He had a wonderful smile. As I knew him over time, and it was something that endeared him to other people and to me, he had a very distinctive walk. And he also had a little cock of his head that was just precious, because he didn't quite stand up straight. He kind of cocked his head, so he wasn't quite to his full 5'11" all the time, I don't think. But it was just kind of looking out from under this wasp of hair that always fell down on his forehead, and with this smile and kind of twinkle in his eye, and it just, I don't know, characteristics that endeared him to me. But it was his humility that was just such a strong attribute or character trait of his.
Didn't he get like the Iron Award or something like that
As an intern, he may have.
Whatever.
You needed to be an Iron Man to survive in those days, because they were on call 24 hours.
Yeah.
And even when they were theoretically off call, they still worked. They just didn't have. But like he would work till 10 o'clock at night on his off call, on a good night, and then hopefully get enough sleep to start at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
But that was at every other night. You're on call and then you're off call. So it was a very rigorous, which made it a little tricky for dating. It was, we'd have a date.
Yeah.
And I thought, gosh,
where is he?
Well,
He's not really very alert here.
Well, he was alert, but it was like we'd have a date and then I wouldn't hear from him for weeks. And I thought, what's with this guy? But I also knew the life he was living, and we obviously had a few more dates, but it was just a very rigorous schedule in those days. It's not like
This is in Portland.
Yeah. And of course they don't do rotating internships anymore.
Right, yeah.
And now, guys and gals who are in preparation, they work certain hours, and they have benefits, and they get salaries, and it's like the real world, but they don't want to work or like it. And I know Bill, my recently deceased husband, I remember him talking about, he said those were the times he learned, in the middle of the night. And of course he was a whole generation ahead of Bernie, but that round the clock, which is arduous and exhausting, and I used to think, how do they get awakened out of a sleep and have to respond and give exacting medication orders or treatment intervention orders, and they're exhausted, and I think, and how can they possibly, so I sort of see a mix of the advantage of the old school, but also the benefit of the way they do it now. And I don't know, probably somewhere in between is the better way to go. It was always Dr. Bernard.
Right.
Dr. Bernard.
So
Yours truly.
The world was
Yours
the world
truly.
was good.
Went to see Dr. Bernard.
Yeah, and she had a son that was a doctor.
Yeah.
And that was Bernie's.
Yeah.
Should we think about done with taping or?